printouts tonight.
All right.
Sadly wasting a lot of paper, but at least it was recycled paper.
Well, that's good. Probably soy-based inks too, I bet.
Probably. I'm not positive on that because Jim picks them, but it's probably true.
Hi, Karen. Welcome.
Hi, thank you. Good evening, everybody.
Hello.
All right, welcome. Good evening to everybody. I'd like to call to order this meeting of the Tarpon Springs Sustainability Committee this Thursday, October the 15th at 6 p.m. Can we please get a roll call?
Chairperson Larson.
Present.
Vice Chairperson Robinson. Member Mandalou. Mr. Mandalou.
Here.
Ms. Mimino.
Here.
Ms. Gallagher. And Ms. Sanger.
Here.
Did I hear Ms. Gallagher or not?
You did. I'm sorry, I was muted.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
I'm here. All right, so let's go right into our first agenda item, which is the discussion of the community engagement listening session. So I'm going to hand it over to Paul Smith to guide us into that conversation.
Thank you, Dory. So this item, I wanted to make a few background comments so everyone understands IFAS's role, IFAS. I actually worked with them ahead of time. They're working on a very similar community engagement type of work in a similar subject area as us, and I asked if they would include us in their work. So they're really here by invitation, and their help has been free and very much appreciated. So I just wanted to thank them up front for being with us tonight. They're going to give an overview of the work they've done with us so far. And as I've said before, I really see this as the beginning for us as a sustainability committee and the city to continue conversations with the community. And some of that, IFAS will be touching base back with us on these initial efforts as we go along. So I look forward to continuing to work with them. And Ramona, would you like to take it from here?
Great. Thank you, Paul. Good evening, everyone. My name is Ramona Madison Hector. I'm a regional specialized agent in urban sustainability. I work in the Southwest District, and I live here in Pinellas County, and my office is at the Botanical Gardens in Largo. So I have a wonderful campus when I am there. We've been delighted to work with Paul and Dory and the committee and the residents of the city of Tarpon Springs. And I don't know if you are familiar with the questions we have been asking, but I will start there, and then I'll have Thomas Rupert introduce himself and provide some of the background or information that we heard from folks who did participate. So we structured this similarly to a project that we are working on with the Kettering Foundation. If you haven't heard of them, they do a lot of work in democracy. So they are very interested in the ecology of democracy and how democratic practices can be used within communities and should be used within communities. And we have been applying it to sustainability, myself and another colleague who is on the East Coast of Florida. So based on our work with the Kettering Foundation, we arrived at the 4 questions that we used for the listening sessions last week. Question number 1 was, what do you value about the community of Tarpon Springs? Question number 2, what concerns do you, your friends, family, coworkers have about living in Tarpon Springs? Question 3, what types of efforts should the city prioritize to meet needs of you and your communities and neighbors in the future? And question number 4 was along the lines of, how can the city and the community collaborate to work on these priorities or issues that we identified at each of the listening sessions? Based on our work with Kettering, we find that the values-based question works really well for introducing and connecting all of the participants at the listening sessions, and then we can dive into some of their concerns and as well as some of their interest in terms of long-term needs and priorities for the city and overall the region, if you would, because so many of these issues tend to be interconnected and share in the quality of life. So Thomas Rupert will provide some of the highlights from the listening sessions last week. So I'll have Thomas introduce himself, and then we'll see how it goes in terms of questions or feedback from the committee. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you very much, Ramona, and thank you, Paul and Sustainability Committee. So I want to note from the outset here, before talking about some of the input we received, that yes, the question that we started with, what do you value about the community of Tarpon Springs, is extremely broad. It's actually much, much broader than the purpose or the real goal that we had with the grant-funded project that is helping us to do this collaboration with the city of Tarpon Springs, as that grant-funded project specifically focuses on sea level rise and flooding impacts, particularly in underrepresented communities. But yet we did start, one of the reasons we start with such a broad question is, as Ramona noted, more connect with the community. In addition, I think it's just very important when trying to work with underrepresented communities that you give them the opportunity and you actually truly listen to what are their primary concerns, because it's a foundational principle in the idea of outreach and extension that you first find out what people care about before you try to quote unquote educate them Because the analogy I've used before is if somebody is really in desperate need of a refrigerator and yet you are just insisting on trying to sell them a washing machine, you're probably going to fail. But if you know they need a refrigerator, it's going to be a really easy sell. So it's understanding what people care about. So with that, some of the high points, when we asked what people value about the community of Tarpon Springs, it was a very clear and came through repeatedly that they really, really value the natural beauty of Tarpon Springs and all the shoreline and the water resources you have. Also came up numerous times about the diversity and the Greek culture and the interesting mixing of the Greek culture with some of the African American culture and other cultures. People enjoy the small town, many different aspects of the small town feel, whether you call it that small town feel or that it's an easier to engage with community, that the scale is more human. They really like that neighbors are caring. They enjoy the fact there are a lot of very focused and effective community organizations that work in the interest of the community. And people also really like that there are small businesses where they know and recognize people, and they appreciate the recreational facilities there. And then the question two, what concerns do you, your friends, family, coworkers, and neighbors have about living in Tarpon Springs? And here we got a broad array of issues, and I'm going to start with one that's one point that came up was people wanted a more walkable community. There was an expressed need, despite the fact of all these different community organizations, there was still expressed a need for helping low income and poor people folk, and with a greater focus on affordable housing and food availability. Concerns about a loss of that community feel that is so valued as the city of Tarpon Springs grows. And we also did hear people discussing the sea level rise impacts and especially those impacts on small businesses in the tourism industry, particularly focused on the docks area, since that is such a big part of the tourism draw there in Tarpon Springs. On a related note, sea level rise impacts on sewage and water quality and drainage issues within the city, which of course relates also to the infrastructure problems generally, and sea level rise and flooding and their impacts on tourism and local businesses. So you kind of see a pattern there of water, drainage, flooding, sea level rise, and the impacts, cascading impacts on tourism. We heard a lot of concerns about public health and the equity issues involved there, along with the long-term impacts of the pandemic on the tourism industry and the impacts on local businesses, of course, and long-term economic impacts there. And we also heard concerns about increasing violence in the community of Tarpon Springs. And I think that's potentially also related to the historical and even physical divide that was mentioned amongst African Americans, poorer people, and others in the community. And finally, with question three, what types of efforts should the city prioritize to meet the needs of you and your neighbors? And we had a lot of different responses here, and seeking greater diversity in the listening sessions that all these responses came from, because there was an expressed desire to ensure that there's deep and broad community engagements on the challenges facing Tarpon Springs. So that point was well taken. Another point for prioritizing this, the city was encouraged to prioritize is homelessness and the need to provide people that are homeless a step up rather than a handout, or in other words, something that's more durable than a simple handout. A focus on clean and renewable energy, a focus on attracting more people, both locals and out-of-town tourists, to the downtown area to support those businesses. The city could focus on using the food culture and character of Tarpon Springs to draw more tourism for revenue. And there was also a desire to see the city focus on city beautification, cleaning up of older abandoned homes and garbage, not only as a part of attracting tourism income, but also as a way of engaging citizens in that beautification process and how that can actually itself build community amongst people that live there. And that relates to an expressed desire to see the city focus on providing opportunities for people to get involved in the community so that they can increase their investment and sense of belonging in the community. Because again, as you recall, that was one of the points that was really valued in the city of Tarpon Springs. People wanted the city to focus on more discussions on climate change and civil rise. So I think it's great what the Sustainability Committee is doing right here. Of course, planning for civil rise and how to address it, finding ways to help families connect and share the burdens and joys of home life and to have them find some more time and ability to be involved in community. And I would be remiss if I didn't note that that might be very well related to some of the equity issues. And another interesting point was that the city could emphasize working to help the many great community organizations that you have already to not reinvent the wheel by ensuring that when they're working on similar topics, that they could actually collaborate together on that. And that Tarpon Springs should also collaborate with other local governments and make sure to take action on whatever plans come to fruition through the Sustainability Committee and these listening sessions. And I guess then there was a question that we only reached in, I think, one of the listening sessions, and that was, what are the top 3 things the city is doing well for residents? And what are 3 areas or things where the city could improve? Some of the things that people thought there could be some improvement in is targeting some of the younger up and coming African-American leaders in the community, doing more outreach and collaboration with the many churches in the community, focus even more on listening to the community. And then things that the city is doing well is the Tarpon Springs Ministerial Association as an example of collaboration, the Citizens Alliance for Progress, and that CAP came up numerous times throughout the session. So that was good to hear. And something else that they're doing well, people noted the Sustainability Committee itself is something great. And for a possibility, it was mentioned that there were some creative ideas for the Sustainability Committee. And one of those was maybe a citywide scavenger hunt as a tool to increase community engagement and maybe bring some new voices and some fun to the table. And also create a survey specifically for the African-American community to ensure that their input is heard and their voices are heard in this. So Ramona or Paul, is there anything that you'd like to add?
I think one thing I would want the committee to keep in mind is that we've only conducted 3 listening sessions, right? So what we have is a snapshot of a snapshot in the sense of, 3 listening sessions doesn't necessarily constitute the entire community of Tarpon Springs that would want to attend or participate. So I think we need to consider as a committee and as a project in terms of what Thomas is working on with the flood risk project is how many more of these we need to convene. And based on our interactions and discussions with the committee, our goal was to work through the list of champions that Doria and the committee had put together. And then we would dive in deeper to look at some other constituent engagement opportunities to support the project that Thomas is working on, but also to provide and refine input for whatever action plan the city and the committee would decide to move forward and to prioritize to some extent based on what we're hearing from the community, what might be, the top 5 or top 10 things that the city of Tarpon Springs would want to work on. I do want to ask Sharon Joy Kleisch, who is with us tonight, if she would like to provide any input here, since Sharon listened and, has had a lot of experience in this community and within Pinellas County, if she would like to add anything based on her musings. I like to call them convergences. She does a good job with.
Well, thank you for that surprise invitation, Ramona. As you all have gone through, and thank you, Thomas, for your succinct summary. It sparks my heart again. I feel like we've lit the fire again tonight. Tarpon Springs to me is a beautiful microcosm of diversity of diversities. Let's be clear, diversity is more than 1 or 2 things. And that's part of what I heard. I really am excited of even though they were small snapshots of what we heard in the earlier listenings, I like what I heard, and I admit my bias, and think that you are a living treasure chest in more ways than you know. So I'll just leave it with that as a departing teaser. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. Paul, we'll turn it over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. And always great way to close with comments from Sharon. I do want to mention, I look forward to moving into some other media with the group, such as in-person meetings once we're able to do that. I think that our virtual meetings are great, but they do have limitations, it seems, in participation amount. So I think, we recognize that, and this committee has talked about it. So I think it's just more validation that we look forward to this just being the beginning. So with that, Dory, I'll bring it back over to you for discussion.
Great. And I just wanted to thank again Ramona and Thomas and Sharon Joy for helping us facilitate those preliminary conversations. I think there's just that I would like to see continued conversations with the community that will help us to kind of guide the work that we're doing with this sustainability action plan. And I wanted to highlight that I think that we heard lots of different, a wide range of concerns and values from the community. And I think that we should consider that when we're looking at the plan itself. I know that personally, when I initially did outreach to the commissioners individually to try to seek support for creating a sustainability action plan, creating a sustainability committee, I shared with them the STAR system, and I'm going to share my screen so that I can talk about that. So this is a sustainability framework that a lot of communities have adopted. The city of St. Petersburg is using this framework, as well as I know Broward County and like lots of other communities throughout the country. And I think that it really does touch on a lot of the things that we initially wanted to focus on, like the built environment and climate and energy, but then it also, and natural systems, the things that you traditionally think of with sustainability. And it also looks at the other two pillars of sustainability, which is the economy and industry, and then also the human aspect of sustainability, which is the arts and education and equity empowerment, health and safety. So I guess just kind of reflecting on the listening sessions and where we are, realized that I was maybe thinking of this whole big picture, including all of these in the sustainability action plan. But that I don't know that we ever came to like a consensus or agreed that as a group. I kind of assumed it myself. So wanted to open that up for a conversation amongst our committee members. So I'll just pause there and get some feedback.
Dory, I found the dichotomy between the first and the second listening session to be interesting. In the first listening session, the questions were merely asked in the manner that was just described, and we got responses regarding the homeless. We got responses regarding the difference between the Black cemetery and the quote unquote Greek cemetery. And we got responses about perhaps increasing violence in Tarpon Springs. We got the old saw about give a man a fish versus teaching a man a fish. But there was little or nothing except for a comment by Thomas at the end about flooding or sea level rise. In the second listening session, in contrast, a couple of us focused in on the risks to the community from various aspects of climate change. Karen talked about a kayak at the bottom of her street. I talked about the projections for heat and for flooding. And Paul specifically talked about climate change areas that the committee has looked at, like shoreline, sea level rise, heat, public health, clean water, et cetera, resilience. And in the second listening session, we got responses that were quite different. We got things like from David Lohman of Oddfellows, a concern about rising tides, and the quote, people will or people must. The problem of rising tides is not addressed and fixed. From Reverend Snare, he talked about concerns of overdevelopment. He said the city needs to be more walkable. He said we need more rain barrels. We need more renewable and clean energy. And Jean Hungeveld, the president of the chamber, said floods shut the docks down. She said she saw firsthand the effect of Hurricane Irma on this community. Other things that she has seen in Tarpon Springs remind her of issues with flooding, et cetera, that she became familiar with when she lived in different areas around the Chesapeake Bay. So I think we got answers at the second listening session because of the focus, because of the strategic, just a little bit of education of our responders from Paul and a couple of others of us, that we're not writing a vision statement for the city of Tarpon Springs. That's not our charge. The resolution that created this committee very specifically is focused on environment. And the kind of general questions are nice, but we are not dealing with an entire city umbrella. We are focused on, and we need to focus on if we're ever going to finish our work, the problems that climate change and the environment and environmental risks pose to our committee.
Can I ask
got
a
it.
question since I wasn't at the second session? Is that last comment coming from you, Dr. Robinson, or is it something that was stated in that meeting that the sustainability doesn't have an overarching effect on city planning at all? Or what did you just say? I'm sorry, is it coming from you or is it coming from someone that was at that particular session?
It's coming from the discussions that this committee began with and we have been having for a year. And it is coming from the risks that the city faces, specifically from the environmental change. And it's coming from the resolution that created our committee.
Mm-hmm.
So can I jump in and make a comment? I was not able to participate in the, first I have a request. I was not able to participate in the first listening session. I was able to be there for the second and third ones. Is it possible to get a list of the people who attended all the sessions, just so we know who, maybe should we continue with this in the future if they were invited the first time and couldn't? Maybe there's a representative from their same group that could be there for the next time. It just might give us an idea of who we got all the input from. And the other thing, just real quickly, I wanted to mention, because I've been thinking about this a lot since I listened to the first session, was one of the questions, I believe, and I may not have written it down verbatim, so I'm sorry, but was what concerns do you, your friends and neighbors have about living in Tarpon Springs? And so I think some of the things, maybe Paul Robinson, that you were discussing are some of the concerns that people have in their communities in Tarpon Springs. And I think that we're in a position where the things that we're looking to write about and help make the city more sustainable will in turn help address some of the things that were concerns for other people. I agree with you. The scope of what we would be asked to do, should we address, homelessness as our priority in the sustainability committee, maybe well beyond the reach and the scope of what we're expected to do. But I think that by addressing certain sustainability elements, we are in turn
able to help address some of those things. And again, with the resolution, one of our charges is to empower every resident of the city, regardless of social or economic, placement in our community. So I think that it was good to hear that so many of these concerns weren't necessarily focused on climate change. Yet I think that, it just literally one comment somebody made to me at one point, who I don't believe was able to be on any of the sessions, was one of their biggest concerns in their community is crime. And how is the sustainability committee going to help with crime in their community? And I said, that's a great question. And I don't know that independently we can do that, but if we're thinking about, right up the road from me, they put a bunch of new lights in because we had an incident a few years ago in our neighborhood. And, I kind of chuckled at how simple it is we put lighting in that's more, conducive to our environment, so in that effort, we're not addressing crime specifically, but we are looking at ways that we can be more sustainable. So if we're going to put these lights in, how are we going to do that? Are we going to do that, in the grand scope of things, being more sustainable? So that was just kind of my 2 cents. I really appreciated the listening sessions. I heard from, things that don't affect, that I don't notice in my everyday life necessarily. There was an awareness brought to me. So I appreciated them, but I don't know. I do think it's important to listen to the concerns of everybody in the community. I just don't know that we are necessarily going to be able to address them in being that specific. We are not, as a sustainability committee, are we charged with fixing homeless issues in the city or food insecurity, et cetera? Not necessarily, but again, I think the things that we're looking at doing do then address those secondarily.
Mhm.
Dory, while I'm not a committee member, might I ask permission to add something from the summary that I had emailed to Paul and Ramona that I neglected to add at the beginning? It's
Sure.
relevant to this question. Yeah, there was at one point something kind of similar to this question came up, and it was in listening session number 2. And Dave Silman, I don't have anything verbatim from him here, but my notes say that when talking about, the breadth of what is discussed and whether or not housing, food, medical care are greater concerns than climate change and sea level rise, one of the things that he said was that you cannot effectively address climate change and sea level rise without also addressing many of these other issues. And he said that he viewed a lot of the best ways to address climate change and sea level rise inherently involve addressing challenges such as housing, food, medical care, and other long-term or chronic issues. And he discussed the growing change towards a cleaner energy environment as a real economic opportunity rather than necessarily a cost. So he was actually discussing a lot of the interconnections there.
Okay, thank you for that extra piece. I think like when I just was looking at what we have already reviewed from other communities and where we're at, I think it's important to note that we're not writing just like Largo, it's their environmental action plan. And with Sarasota, it was their climate action plan. I don't think that we were charged with writing that narrow of a document. I think we were charged with writing a sustainability action plan. And I think that there's a lot of overlap with, it's the 3 pillars that we're talking about are people, place, and the economy. I don't think that we can just focus on the environmental pieces and the climate pieces and not also include some of those social components that, and I don't think, like, for example, I'm going to share my screen again. with the, for example, with the STAR system, I don't think that when any city is doing this, you have to have a component of each of the squares. Rather, you use this as a framework, and then we would decide as a community where we would really like to focus. And I also don't think, to Karen's point, I don't think the city or the sustainability committee has to be the group that would be in charge of any of these specific actions. When you look at, for example, this is St. Petersburg's, and when this is their integrated sustainability action plan from the city of St. Pete, and it wasn't written when we started initially our conversations last fall. It was published since then. For example, equity and empowerment. So that would be this square here. Looking at civic engagement. Their one target or their one action is to partner with local groups to increase voting and volunteerism. That to me is something that would perpetuate sustainability, but it's not necessarily something that the Sustainability Action Committee is going to actually do. So if you look at the chart here, partnering with local groups to increase voting and volunteerism, it's a collaboration is the action, and you're collaborating with other community partners that would perhaps do the work. So I don't think that even if we do adopt this broader scope of the Sustainability Action Plan, that it would put the onus on our committee to be the ones doing the work per se.
Mhm.
Dory, if this is Ramona, and I know Sharon Joy was before me, so I will defer to Sharon Joy, but I'd like to chime in on the framework that you are contemplating.
Okay.
Ramona, go ahead, finish.
Okay, so I think as Thomas mentioned before, and we heard it from Karen, who did a really good job summarizing and extending some of what we heard at the committee. One of the things that I have done in my role here within the county and the region is I've worked with Pinellas County, and we did do the STAR Communities framework, which has now transitioned into Lead for Cities. So Lead for Cities has moved, if you would, and adopted many of the STAR frameworks and metrics. And in their new framework for sustainability and certification at local government level, there is an entire category that is quality of life. And I think what we're hearing within the community, as Karen artfully articulated, was that some of these issues may not seem that they're directly related to sustainability, but by improving the quality of life in general, we are making an impact on this social pillar of sustainability, and we are making an impact on equity. So I just want us to consider that, you know, STAR Community Framework is a great framework. I would also caution the committee, given my experience with both STAR communities, my involvement with Lead for Cities right now, and my prior involvement with Florida Green Building Coalition and their frameworks for local government, that all of these standards and certification programs are meant to be helpful in the sense that I don't want the committee to consider them as being prescriptive. You don't have to do all of these actions. You don't have to undertake all of these things. They're really meant to be a baseline assessment of where you are as a community, as a city, and to help you to strive for what might be some long-term actions, plans, measures that you as a community would like to put in place that would reflect what you may have heard from community constituents who attended meetings. So just be mindful of that, you know, don't go into it based on my experience of, you know, you want to be gold or you want to be platinum or you want to be silver or whatever that desire is. Like, this is where we are right now as a community point in time. And this is where we hope to be once we're able to travel down that road with the metrics that are within the framework. So I think STAR is a great framework, a great place to start. Something to consider because it's no longer valid as an assessment tool. So you might want to look at Florida Green Building Coalition, or you may want to look at the Lead for Cities framework. But I think considering the quality of life component pieces is so important because it's always the pillar of sustainability that is often overlooked and undervalued when we think about the communities and the long run and how we are going to create not just a culture of sustainability, but sustain that for the long term. Thank you, Dory, for allowing me to chime in.
Mhm.
Go ahead, Sharon Joy.
Yes, thank you. And I'm an outsider from St. Petersburg, and I've been involved in the sustainability movement here for a very long time. So, Paul, I feel your pain. As you spoke, it hit a part of me that remembered the pain. And I think I started off thinking about the environment being out of balance. And then somebody came up with this great word, sustainability. And it hurt a little bit because I couldn't quite stretch that far. But it seems to be in this 15 or so years, I've had a chance to bounce around and learn with so many people, including Karen Bolter, whom I see is on this call, down in Fort Lauderdale, I believe, in the sea level rise sciences. What I normally, you're a neuroscientist, I think you introduced yourself as, right, Paul?
It's one of the hats I wear, Sharon Joy. Thank you. Yes.
That's what I thought. So I'm thinking, ooh, I need to talk to that guy, because what I began to realize is what I personally have done is just tried to make it so I could handle the sanity of the insanity of how complex this is. And so to move from science to sustainability to, oh my God, what is this climate change thing? Would it get out of the way? I'm just into sustainability. And again, I've been part of the process here in St. Petersburg, moving into and through the STARS community. I was part of the ICLEI endeavor with our business, the Connection Partners. And what I keep finding is it keeps getting bigger.
Mhm.
And it reminded me of synapses in our brains. I think one of our listening calls, I talked about our bodies representing a whole city, a whole system. And think about the way the synapses reach out for each other, making these connections. And rather than thinking I have to do it all by myself, I've paid more attention to the networks that have been forming in St. Petersburg, Pinellas County, now including your city, as I say, that is such a gem. And I'm finding that collective learning, the sciences of living systems, of collective intelligence is, oh my gosh, showing up. And I, instead of doing more, am doing less. And so back to the resolution, the clarity of that, of course, a sustainability committee, if that's what you call yourself. Some people are now evolving into resilience and regeneration. Just to warn you, there are bigger, more words out there. Is that what is the whole city doing to be sustainable for the future? I mean, as I remember on that first call, people weren't where the grant is. They were where their pain is. And they addressed the safety. They addressed the fear of dying. They addressed the fact of what's going on with the Greek cemetery and the Black cemetery. Oh my gosh, will they get out of the way? I'm only trying to deal with sustainability, but it's a whole system. And what I've heard over and over and over is your city has an incredible collection of diversity, passion, and values for what I'm biased to think of what's right. So sorry about that, but I don't think you can hold it into sustainability.
I'm going to respond directly, if I may, Dory. Sharon Joy, I agree completely. The networks need to be developed. And inevitably, if we do our job properly, we will interface with other organizations like ours in many ways. It can be so general that it doesn't really have a definition. It can be too specific. We need to find a balance because we do have a responsibility to produce a sustainability plan to the Board of Commissioners. And they were very specific when they created our committee. And Dory was very specific when she spoke to them and told them why the city of Tarpon Springs needed a sustainability committee. It has become much more general since those 2 dates. But I'd just like, for clarification, I just want to read the resolution that created this commission, starting with the third whereas. As you know as well as I do, the first couple of whereases don't mean anything. They're, apple pie and hot dogs and red, white, and blue. But you get into the third whereas, and they're talking about energy efficiency, cleaner coastlines and waterways, property value and business vitality. The fourth talks about systems and materials that are harmonious with land, water, and energy. The fifth talks about reducing greenhouse gas emissions. The next talks about reducing impacts of a changing climate, including sea level rise, extreme rainfall, extreme heat events, droughts, flooding, storms, human well-being, natural resources. The next one talks about, and this is rather grandiose, the Board of Commissioners wishes to reduce rising sea levels. If we can figure out how to do that, we will definitely advise them. Intense rainfall and other climatic stressors. And the next one wishes to lead by example as a green municipality. Sustainability can be defined extremely broadly to the extent that we'll never finish our job. It can be described so narrowly that no one will want to work with us. We need to find. It is a general rule of thumb, I believe, that when you are doing community outreach, you need to structure your questions in such a way that you get answers that are useful to your responsibility and your charge. And that's what I'm saying. I think we had great listening sessions. I think we got lots of information, but I think we got better information vis-a-vis our responsibilities in the second one. Now, let me see if I can find it in the second listening session, when Kurt Snare was talking about overdevelopment and the risks of sea level rise, he also said, and I think Jonathan quoted this, there's too much overlap in which various organizations in our community engage in. If we could work together, we could be more efficient. We're going to find efficiencies like those as we go along in this process. And that doesn't mean we should ignore them. But we do have a charge, and it is fairly specific.
So, okay, thank you. I am starting to see like the different views, I guess, of what different folks on the committee perceive to be our charge. So I think at this point we really should, because we did at one point decide that the scope was going to be more focused on what the city was going to do instead of the whole community. I think that it would be good for us to kind of take a pause and take a temperature check and see if we could come up with a motion and agree upon as a group whether we are going to keep this a climate action plan or if this is going to be a sustainability action plan that would include more of what we heard during the listening sessions of what the community is looking for. Is there someone that would like to give their idea of which direction they would like to go?
I would like to share just from the perspective of looking even at all of the boxes on this that are on this form here, and imagining, if the sea level was to rise, another 2 feet, how irrelevant a lot of the topics would be. But that being said, it's like you can put Band-Aids on lots of little infections that are symptoms of not being sustainable. And the patient which is our environment, could have sepsis, which needs to be treated in an integrated way and a systems engineered way. There's a concept of systems engineering that is applied to all aspects of an approach. And I can't imagine picking and choosing a patchwork of sustainable concepts without understanding that everything in nature is connected, and we have to emulate nature in order to heal the damage that has already been done. And that's all I have. So I accept that I believe that sustainability needs to be broadly applied, not just picking and choosing subjects. Thank you.
So is that a motion that you would like to offer then, that we take a broader approach to this?
That we take an integrated approach to the writing the sustainability plan. Which I think we have been doing. We have been looking at all facets. We have not just been separating symptoms of climate change or symptoms of environmental potential catastrophe. There's no way to separate those things. They're all part of the same system. So I think sustainability has to be one system that is the cover for the choices that we make within the city of Tarpon Springs.
Is there a second to that?
I second it.
Dory, could you restate the motion? I didn't follow all of it.
Denise, would you mind?
That in approaching our development of a sustainability plan, we are aware that we're taking an integrated approach that will touch upon all aspects of the health and well-being of the community now and into the future.
Okay,
And that it
thank
would
you.
emulate nature in that approach.
Thank you. Taylor, are you still comfortable seconding that?
Yeah, I feel like she's saying basically it all touches upon everything else. Like when you can have a sustainable environment, which our resolution is mainly talking about a lot of it, energy efficiency and things like that. But if you're also talking about keeping the city sustainable, that involves things like homelessness and good job opportunities and affordable housing. So yeah, I still second it.
Okay, as discussion before we get a vote?
I think it's too ill-defined for a motion. When we talk about an integrated approach that deals with all aspects of health and well-being in a community, that's an endless, open-ended motion.
Denise, would you be inclined to modify your motion to just shorten it so that we are taking an integrated approach to sustainability?
Yes.
Isn't that what we're doing anyway? I mean, by reaching out into the community and trying to understand what the concerns are and getting some feedback and what things they think are important. I mean, I think we're even without a motion, I feel like that's what we're really just, it's still, to me, in the information gathering stage. And we're not even ready to, I know we wrote an introduction, but I understood that to be a work in progress still, and that that we are still in the information gathering stage.
Yeah,
So
if I could
that's where I felt we were I appreciate Denise's motion, but I think that defines what we're currently doing.
I think that there was
if I
maybe
may.
not, I think there was not clarity on what we were doing. And I think that's why this conversation is important.
Okay, no problem.
If I could just step back for a second, if everyone can hear me all right. What's happened, I believe, is the listening sessions have given us information, but they've also caused us to ask some fundamental questions. I think it's perfect. I mean, that's exactly what these sessions are supposed to do. We're supposed to allow ourselves as a committee, as a group, to be affected by what we hear. And so that's why this discussion is coming back to what is this all about? I think Dory, as the chair, is trying to get clarification as we move into this community engagement and ultimately back to our sustainability action plan. We're going to be writing focus areas of things that we think need to be addressed, not by the sustainability committee, but more like a checklist of our city and these areas that need to be addressed by somebody. So I think that's going back to the motion. Dory's asking the group one more time, based on what we're hearing, do we want to revisit our approach to the Sustainability Action Plan, the scope of it?
And the alternative is just focused on specifics, because if you're just focusing on sea level rise or bringing carbon down in the atmosphere, which we have no control over unless we're part of a global experience, right? I mean, I don't think that anything can be separated from the global experience, and that's why, to me, the idea of an integrative sustainability plan makes so much sense, because you can't separate our air from the air outside of Tarpon Springs, or our sea level rise from sea level rise outside of Tarpon Springs. It's all part of the same integrated system. So yes, we may have, but we may look at this third point on the resolution and say, well, there's some very specific language here, but it's symbolic, because there's nothing that can be separated. I'm looking even at the box on historic preservation, and with a city that's flooded, historic preservation is irrelevant. Although we're not taking over the job of the historic preservation group. So I think that if we're looking at isolating components in order to fulfill the resolution in a very systematic way, we're missing the greater point, because everything has to be holistic.
I don't think we're ready to consider a motion right now. I move to table this discussion and bring it up at a later meeting.
Can't hear you.
Or you're muted.
Sorry. We have a motion on the floor in a second, though, so I don't know procedurally, can we just table that?
I think we can, but the call is yours, Madam Chairperson.
I would like to go ahead and continue with the vote, just so that we can see as a group if we are looking, if collectively, if we're thinking of this as integrated or as a narrow focus on climate action.
Chair Larson, could you please restate the motion for me? Wording exactly what it.
That we are voting to create an integrated sustainability action plan.
Okay, thank you.
So we need a roll call.
Okay. Mrs. Gallagher,
Yes.
Mr. Mandalou,
Yes.
Ms. Mamino,
Yes.
Dr. Robinson,
Yes.
and Chair Larson.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. I think that the only thing left with this item is to thank our partners for the listening session. I know that we will be having further discussions about continuing engaging the community. And thank you very much for helping us with this process tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for having us.
For having
Bye-bye.
us.
The next item is a continued discussion on events, and we are getting short on time, and we still have 2 presentations. So I would like to hold those 2 items and push them to the next agenda forward, if you guys don't mind, so that we can hear from our presenters tonight.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, then let's go on to our presentation from Kevin Powell, the Building Development Director, please.
All right. Good evening, everybody. The second presentation was a follow-up with the arborist. Unfortunately, Shannon did have a conflict tonight, so she won't be available to follow up on that. However, I can go ahead and take the information if you had anything on that and get those to her and get that information back to you. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I've got a short slide presentation, and I'm going to kind of do this more of a interactive question and answer with the group as we go through. Bear with me 1 second here. I'm not sure what you're seeing right there.
We can see the slides. I think if you go down or up to the top to the presenter mode, then we would see just the slides. There we go.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so my name is Kevin Powell. I am the Building Development Department Director. And I just want to go over a few things tonight and basically talk about the various functions of my department. The last meeting you did hear from one of the members of my department, which was Shannon Brewer, the municipal arborist. And so we oversee that area. We also, of course, are the permitting department. We do plan review, building inspections, and of course, we do floodplain management. So when we talk about sustainability in the Florida Building Code, there's really nothing in the Florida Building Code that talks about green building. We do have an energy code that we go by, and it addresses some of the concerns that we have when it comes to sustainability or green buildings, that type of thing. So we have things in there about, minimums of efficiency rating of air conditioning equipment, rating of windows, installation, there's orientation of buildings, how buildings are built. There are other states that are very specific to green building, but in Florida, unfortunately, this is kind of an option when it comes to sustainable type of building materials. And I think a lot of it comes down to what the cost of construction would be if they were going more towards a sustainable type of material. But they're not looking at the end result, which is lower energy costs, lower energy usage, and that type of thing. So there's a federal program, the Energy Star, for new homes. Now, our building code, the energy code, is kind of close to what they're looking for in the Energy Star program. The Energy Star program, of course, is all the way through the house, from building materials to appliances, air conditioning equipment, and that type of thing. They are more stringent than what we would follow within the building code itself. However, Energy Star Homes, that's a voluntary program. There are some communities or some builders that go ahead and use this as a selling item. But there again, the cost of being more sustainable, moving forward and building, is a little bit more difficult when you're trying to develop properties here in Florida. So the Energy Star program, once again, it is a voluntary program, and this is specific here in Florida. This is the Energy Star program for Florida, and it talks about the partnership training and credentialing requirements. The Energy Star partnership agreement for a builder must complete the version 3 builder orientation. It's just an online class that they would go through and do that. Air conditioning, kind of the same thing. They're out there trying to put in a higher efficiency unit on new construction in Florida. It's a minimum of a 14 SEER rating on new construction, and under the Energy Star program, it's a minimum of 15. So there are some differences between the Energy Star and our energy code that's adopted by Florida. Also, these programs, they're third-party inspected to make sure that they are using the products that they're saying that they're using in order to make it an Energy Star and to certify it as an Energy Star property. As I'm going through, if you have any questions on any of these areas, please feel free to stop me and ask some questions, because I'd rather this be a little more interactive than just a PowerPoint presentation.
Would you mind what you said, what the building development department does, and I didn't catch all of it. So would you mind repeating that, just so we have a better understanding of?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. So what we do is we have the municipal arborist within our department.
Okay.
We're also the permitting for building construction, the plan review process, building inspections, floodplain management, and we also do local business tax receipt. Don't understand how that got there, but we do that.
Okay, so I'm going to read it back if you don't mind, just to make sure I got it all. So you've got the municipal arborist, permitting, site plan review, inspections, local business tax receipt, and the floodplain management.
Correct.
Thank you.
And can I ask a quick
So
question? I'm really curious how the Energy Star relates to things like leadership in energy and environmental design, LEED certification. Are they two of the same but alternative programs, or?
LEED certification is going to be a different program than this. I really didn't put anything in here about the LEED. There again, that is an alternative with sustainable materials used, kind of along the lines, but to be the Energy Star program is a federal program to get your house, and LEED, and having a LEED certification on your house is a good thing too. Does that answer that for you? Or?
Well, I know that they're green building certification. I just wondered what they, the specifics were. I mean, how they relate to one another. I guess that's something that I would like to do a little bit more.
I will go ahead and lead and green building. So you just want to know the
Which one is more stringent? I know that you can achieve different levels of LEED, platinum, gold, silver, and it's, you know, they have their certification. Well, not the certification. They have their evaluation of what the buildings are that achieve the different levels.
Right.
But I guess I just would like to understand how it relates to Energy Star, whether there's any overlap, whether it's not just materials, but it's actually inherent design of the building to be, let's say, passive solar or very, you know, well insulated in a way that you have a minimal amount of, I mean, new buildings. It's
right,
obviously, it's new buildings that really are the most affected by that.
Right. Yeah. I'll go ahead and do some research on that and see, you know, what the differences between the two, which is more stringent. You know, it seems like most stuff, you know, with the Energy Star, of course, is put on by the federal government. So LEED may be similar. May even be better, but I'll go ahead and get that information for you.
Thank you.
Kevin, I have a question for you, if I may. This is Robin. I'm wondering, I know that there are some projects that are completed in the city that are LEED Silver or have LEED certification. I believe the old Sweet Bay that's now the Winn-Dixie is LEED Silver, and it was constructed under that. I'm just curious what projects, if any others in the city, have that type of certification, or how does the city encourage those types of, does the city encourage those types of development in our city for projects, or how they go about doing that?
Well, I think we would always encourage that. However, it's always up to the developer what they're going to do. Currently, I don't have any buildings that are going with the LEED certification. Right now, you know, we have the apartments going in, and that's definitely not going to be a LEED certified building. Hospital renovation, but yeah, it's really a voluntary thing, and of course, we would always welcome it. However, it just gets into what the developer wants to do on it.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll go ahead and move along here. Now, there's a Florida Green Building Coalition. It's the state leading certifier of green residential and commercial projects and local government. This is a nonprofit or 501c3 organization that will go out and certify buildings for green. City of Tarpon Springs is affiliated with this. I think they've just changed their level, but I believe we were a platinum member of this, and they look at more than just building. You know, they look at like our electric car parking chargers and those type of things when they evaluate the city overall. So we do get evaluated on that, and I believe our last one was a platinum on that. Now the big thing, floodplain management. That's kind of our big hot topic area right now within the building department in Tarpon Springs. I believe Tarpon Springs is one of the lower areas, if not the lowest area in Pinellas County. So we have a lot of flood concern within the community. Right now, the flood maps are going through a change. Luckily for Tarpon Springs, it's in our favor. So some of the areas that were in a flood zone AE10 are going to a 9. Some areas that were in a velocity zone are going to a coastal A zone. So it helps the residents of Tarpon Springs and building how they can build and where they can build with the flood maps changing. However, we're still waiting for those maps to adopt. As soon as they're adopted, and then Pinellas County will adopt them, of course. Tarpon Springs will adopt those new flood maps. So why do we regulate the floodplain? Well, one of them is obvious, to protect people and property. I know the federal government spends a lot of money during floods, insuring properties and helping those homes or those people in homes to rebuild in their community. So if we know we have low-lying land in a flood, from time to time, you know, that we need to help protect homes and businesses. And this is a big part of what we do every day, and to make sure that federal flood insurance is available by participating in the National Flood Insurance Program, that then helps with the flood insurance and the ability of getting lower rates by our flood ordinance. So we have to go ahead and adopt the flood ordinance, and some things seem to be stringent, but the reason we do that is to help lower the overall cost of flood insurance within the community. Mm-hmm. So we have to be in the NFIP in order to be able to get our homeowners insurance in special flood hazard areas. Once we meet the minimum requirement, we would come in as a 9. 9 means that there's no reduction on your flood insurance or your insurance in a special flood hazard area. Each class that we drop down, there's a 5% reduction in the cost of insurance. So with our ordinance, we can take the baseline FEMA regulation, and we can go through an activities book that tells us, in order for us to lower in certain areas, we need to go ahead and implement this within our ordinance. And it might be freeboard, meaning 1 foot, 2 foot, 3 foot above base flood elevation. So if we have a base flood elevation that's an AE10, our ordinance would say we would need to be at an 11 or a 12 in order to get the points for that activity to help lower our insurance rates within the community. So we also are regulating to save tax dollars. And then, of course, we want to avoid liability and lawsuits. We know areas that are mapped as flood hazard areas, and we could put people in danger if we allow them to build below flood or not build to the standards of windborne debris region, hurricane region. So these are reasons why we go ahead and regulate the floodplain. And if we didn't do this, we could pretty much look at not selling a property within Tarpon Springs if we were put out of the NFIP or did not participate in it. Banks aren't going to loan money on properties that can't be insured, because the insurance companies won't do them because we're not in the NFIP. So we kind of have to be in it, but we can be in at the bare minimum, or we can go ahead and look at it and say, hey, we can save our residents additional money across the board through the entire city by implementing these more restrictive areas within the flood hazard areas. So that is something that we do through the community rating system. And there's a couple things that they look at here. You know, they want to preserve open space in the floodplain. They want to enforce higher standards, like we were talking about. If, you know, it says that we can be at base flood, and that's fine for the minimum, or we can go ahead and enforce a higher standard for safer development through flooding or hurricanes. We're going to do that. So by doing that, that then lowers our score within the community rating system. Develop a hazard mitigation plan, watershed, stormwater management plans. This is something that we do with Pinellas County. This is a county-wide thing. It's not just within the city of Tarpon Springs. We have a mitigation plan through the entire county. We work with the county, their floodplain managers, and the mitigation planning through the entire county, which takes a lot of the costs off of the city for hiring the engineers and doing the research, doing the LiDAR mapping. We can do that across the entire county with all of the cities participating in it. It comes out to be a lot less within, out of the city itself. There's also mitigation grant money that after certain storms, there's a hazard mitigation program. And sometimes that grant money can buy out homes that are repetitive losses. So it's a home that's flooded 2, 3, 4, 5 times. And the federal government says, okay, either we'll go ahead and we'll do a 75-25 grant for you to either raise your structure so we quit having this flooding issue, or we'll go ahead and buy out the property, remove the property, and make green space. As they said, they want to preserve open space in Florida. They also want to go ahead and create additional green spaces in Florida. So they've done that in other places. It takes a while, unfortunately. I think St. Petersburg put in for one to get a house raised 3 years ago, and it just got funded and raised out of the flood. So it sounds great, but it's a long process to get there. We also want to maintain drainage system. We also want to monitor flood conditions and issue warnings. We do that through social media. Obviously, when we have sponge dock flooding, we put that out and say we have flooding at the sponge dock. So we're trying to mitigate some of that onlooker stuff going on down there, which people want to drive through, create wakes and do that. We want to try to minimize that as much as possible. We also want to inform people about flood hazards, flood insurance, and how to reduce flood damage. So we have in my office, I have a floodplain coordinator who spends a lot of time talking with the citizens of Tarpon Springs and explaining to them about the flood hazards, talking to them about flood insurance, giving them the information of our CRS rating score, and to talk with their insurance agents to lower their premiums. Also, we talk about how to reduce flood damage. So those are things that we do within the floodplain area, floodplain management of our department. So property owners in more than 234 Florida communities participate in the CRS program. This is as of May of 2017. So we can range from a discount from 5% to 35%. As I said, we can come into the program at a 9 and be at a 0, but as soon as we go to an 8, we start getting that 5% reduction. In the city of Tarpon Springs, we've managed to get ourselves to a class 6, which is a 20% discount on the premiums in flood hazard areas. I went ahead and took that number, and I was able to get the insurance premiums. And I think citywide, we were saving the citizens of Tarpon Springs close to $1 million overall in insurance. So, the program works. We've really stepped up in this area to make sure that we maintain. We were a class 7 when I got into the department 2 years ago. We were able to take it to a class 6, And now we're evaluated every 3 years because we're considered a good classification. Before it was every 5 years. Now it's every 3 years, and we're coming up on our audit again. They're going to go through all of our elevation certificates. FEMA will go ahead and just come into town and ride around and take a look at things, and they'll come in and ask questions about things that they see out there. And as we continue on with this, we're actively trying to get to a class 5. Pinellas County is at a class 5. I know they're trying to lower down to a 4, which is going to be difficult. Right now, the best rating in Florida is a class 2, and that's in Ocala. So I don't think they have a whole lot of flooding going on in Ocala. It's pretty high there. Southeast Florida, Dade, Broward, Palm Beach, I think they're running in about a class 6, and they're trying to lower their score too. However, when you're on a coast, just like we're a coastal town also, it's going to be hard to get down below that class 5. But still, at a class 6, a class 5, a 20 to 25% discount across your community is tremendous, I think. Any questions on floodplain management? Nothing. Okay, great. So I did talk a little bit about the flood maps changing, and of course they're going to change into our favor, which is good for our community. Some people may look at it as a positive or a negative because it's going to change the way people can develop within Tarpon Springs. So if we were in a V zone, a velocity zone, we're looking at a lot of restrictions on how that property is built. We're looking at breakaway walls because of high wave action. So we have communities that are going from a velocity zone to a coastal A zone, which now changes the way construction is done there. It eases some of the restrictions. So they're not having to get into the breakaway walls or the frangible slabs or those type of things. So, I guess it's kind of a double-edged sword. You look at it one way and say, well, that's great. We've changed from a velocity zone to an A zone. Now I don't have to have all of these, yet we're still in the same area. We're still on a waterfront community. Storm surge is still going to come in, but the engineers hired by FEMA did their LiDAR studies and did all their transect lines throughout the entire city or the county completely. And, we're able to show that no, the old maps, can change because of the current data and the type of data that is used. Now there is a community, Oldsmar went the other way. They went, to where their flood maps changed against them because they're right on Old Tampa Bay, and you're going to get the storm surge coming in. So, that whole area in Oldsmar now is some of it's a velocity zone, and of course the zones went from say AE6 to AE10, so they jumped dramatically. Where we just dropped from a 10 to a 9. There wasn't a huge difference, but it helps out a lot of people when they're trying to develop within the city.
Kevin, we've got one more presenter. Oh, looks like you're on your last slide. I was going to ask if you were wrapping up, so it looks like you are.
Yes, and I don't know, was that Shannon that was supposed to be back, or you got somebody?
One more presenter on item 4.
Okay, perfect. I wasn't sure if it was Shannon was going to follow up, but I didn't. Okay, perfect. Any questions? I do have the one that I will follow up on the lead and Energy Star. Anything else?
Thank you, Kevin, for presenting us with this information. I think that there may be some follow-up questions. If you don't mind us channeling them through Paul Smith and then getting them to you, and then we can follow up maybe even just via email with a future meeting. That would be really helpful.
Perfect.
Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Kevin.
All right. Our next item is the discussion of the follow-up from the last meeting, which was the Shannon the arborist. And I would like, if you guys don't mind, to combine that follow-up when we hear, if we have questions, and we can do follow-up with Kevin Powell to kind of combine those so that we can get to the presentation, because we are running short on time for the evening. Is that okay with everyone? Anyone?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. Then let's move along to the fourth item, which is the Whitcomb Bayou project / grant proposal. And I'm going to turn it over to Paul Robinson to lead this conversation.
Thank you, Dory. If you looked at the letter that was sent from me representing Turn the Tide for Tarpon to Mayor Alahouzes on September 28th, you know some of the basis behind this project and concept. I CC'd that letter to the city manager and to Paul Smith, and the city manager asked that we discuss this proposed project at the Sustainability Committee tonight. So I'm going to try to share my screen. Bear with me. Okay. Can everybody hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, good. Turn the Tide for Tarpon is a non-profit corporation. We are focused on flooding, sea level rise, et cetera, in Tarpon Springs, and we predominantly have been an educational organization up to now. We are affiliated with the Universalist Unitarian Church. We are members of the Chamber of Commerce, and we are affiliated with the Patel College of Sustainability at University of South Florida. In fact, 2 members of our executive committee have graduate degrees from the Patel College. One of those people is Aaliyah Garrett, who is one of our community champions. We are seeking a closer association, a partnership with City of Tarpon Springs. Specifically, we propose partnering with city government to obtain a federal grant to solve the problems of both flooding and erosion along the shores of Whitcomb Bayou. We hope that this project will serve as a model for additional projects along our other waterways. So we're going to be looking obviously at Whitcomb Bayou. We're going to start with some slides from a video in the location of this area. And then we're going to talk about the southern shore. And this is a picture from October 6th, a couple years ago. This is not after a storm. It is simply flooding from high tides. And you can see that there are cars going through what is brackish water. Again, they're creating good wakes. This is salt water. And so there is potential damage to the vehicles. Beyond that of stalling out and getting stuck, there is salt damage potential to these vehicles. You can see the seawall along here does not retain the water in Whitcomb Bayou. This is a old and no longer used boat launch. It's lower by about a foot than the rest of the revetment along this area, but the seawall you can see here is not effective. This is the southern shore of Whitcomb Bayou. And you can see the seawall here, and that flooding, and this is not at high tide. This is a couple hours before high tide on just an average afternoon. Again, you can see the proximity to the street. You can't see it in this slide, but the water actually goes up under this mangrove to about 2 feet from the street. This is on the western edge of Whitcomb Bayou. These are fairly tall palm trees that have been there for a long time. The water has eroded to the land side of many of these trees. You can see, again, the water and the leaning of the trees. And again, you can see that we're going to lose some fairly old stately palms, and that the water is actually threatening the road. We are proposing looking at living shorelines as the first approach to widening and reinforcing the shores of Whitcomb Bayou. But of course, we have to also deal with flooding, so we have to effectively raise the level of the shorelines as well. This is just one type of living shoreline. It is a combination of bags of oyster shells on the water side, and smooth cordgrass and other forms of vegetation that both accrete soil and increase the organic amount of materials at the base of the plant. So the combination of these, you could have, there are other types of living shorelines, and there are types of hybrids that use hard structure or coins, etc., which we could go into at a later time. Some of you are aware that the Board of Commissioners just recently passed unanimously the approval of 2 surveys with geotechnical support to study the conditions along South Spring Boulevard and the confluence of Martin Luther King, Pineapple, and South Spring. The idea is to gain data on flooding, gain data on the heights of the roadway, and also to look at underground infrastructure. Purpose is to have data so that we will have more knowledge as a city going forward before any constructs are designed. We think then that this is a very good time to bring this idea for this project forward. I'm going to stop at that point and introduce our guest. I'm very honored to introduce Dr. Karen Bolter. She's an urban and coastal resiliency expert for Arcadis Corporation, an international engineering and consulting firm. She leads climate change and resilience initiatives. She also specializes in GIS analyses of people, cities, and environment. And she has worked as a professor and a planner for local government. She's active with the Florida Hurricane Response Hub, and she has also presented her research in TV station interviews and has a TED Talk on YouTube, which I've watched now 2 or 3 times, and I strongly recommend. So I could go on and on, but I'd rather introduce Dr. Bolter. Instead of saying the floor is yours, I'm going to say the Zoom is yours.
Thank you, Paul. Wonderful introduction, and these pictures are amazing. I can share my screen now. If you have to stop sharing. Aw. That little girl looks exactly like my niece, my sister's baby. So it's great to see you all, and I was excited that I recognized some people on this call with you guys. The Sharon Joy, great to connect with you again, and I've worked with Thomas Rubert a lot over the years. It's a small family, our Sea Level Rise Climate Group. I've come out to St. Pete for a lot of those ICAR events to speak, but I'm here today. I'm going to try and make it quick, but I love that we're following Kevin, because all the stuff that he was talking about with the the National Flood Insurance Program, the CRS, and I give those presentations too. A lot of our clients, we help them get a better CRS score, and the federal funding that I've been talking to Paul about, and he asked me to share with you guys about, specifically, talking about Whitcomb Bio and what we could do to fund that with FEMA funding. The reason that FEMA is making this money available is because they're your insurance company, and they know that they put this money, not just disaster related funding, but non-disaster related funding. They know that there's a business case and a value proposition. They're awarding this funding because they know that spending the money now, being preventative, is going to save them in future risk. And by the way, just like Kevin mentioned, I know I can keep this very informal with you guys. I have a few discussion topics, but honestly, I just have some reference slides of things that I've done and things that Paul and I have talked about, and I want to keep it really informal. Just telling you about this brand new FEMA program called BRIC, and just a little bit of our team at Arcadis, and then a few extra maps of the Whitcomb Bio of some initial flood assessment I've been working with. And if we get to it, I do have some more slides on the new scoring criteria for this FEMA BRIC grant program, and how the Whitcomb Bayou project could really be a competitive one. Kevin mentioned that St. Pete grant. My team in Tallahassee, in the bottom left, you can see Ed Fernandez and Kelly. They were the ones that lead a lot of the grant development in St. Pete and around your area. I've led the development out of 10 FEMA applications that I've led, 9 of them have been awarded. And if you add up that award money, it's over $55 million. So I have a great track record. My team has a great track record. We're a small team within a large corporation that, we started out of Sandy, and we were able to get our clients, all of our team all together over the last 7 years, over $5 billion in funding. So, this speaks for itself, especially coming from academia where, I don't know if you're aware of those NSF grants, they're very competitive, but that's why I love doing these FEMA funding, not just the application development, helping you choose a project, making the application eligible and competitive, but also, adding other funding sources and helping throughout the grant management process, like once it's awarded, making sure you get reimbursed. So we are a very impressive team, and I love it, especially because our fees are very minimal, and then once the grant is awarded, that's reimbursed. So it's like a pretty easy sell for me that it's not a lot, and we have so much experience with using just the right wording and giving FEMA exactly what they want so that they'll award your application. And so I mentioned this, business case return on investment, and it's so compelling because FEMA did a study on hazard mitigation, this pre-disaster mitigation. They found on average, every $1 that you spend before a disaster is saving you $6 that you would have spent afterwards. So it's being preventative rather than reactive. And right now what we're seeing with resilience, when people are not focusing on resilience, we're just, the disaster hits and we're just, trying to do whatever we can to get back to normal. So we just rebuild things the way they were. And so we get into this disaster rebuild cycle that we can shift out of with these different preventative measures. And so, yeah, FEMA sees this. They know that that's why they offer this money, so that they're not, coming and paying for things afterwards. That they see that, okay, they want to, with these FEMA applications, they want to know, we're going to give you this money and we're going to prevent all this damage so that when the next storm comes, we're not paying for the damage. So they're doing it, for their own interest. And flood risk is really of all of the hazards, these FEMA grants are for all kinds of hazards, whether it's fire, power outages, wind. Flooding is the most deadly. It's over 75% of the federally declared disasters. It accounts for most loss of life. Of course, flooding doesn't obey jurisdictional boundaries. And it's great that you guys are updating the FEMA flood maps, but it's interesting why they're getting it's a better outlook, because they really are not covering a big part of the risk all over South Florida. I'm on the East Coast. We have I've modeled out around your area in Pinellas County the groundwater levels during the wet season. There's some areas along the coast, there's a few feet you dig below the ground and that's your water table. It's tidally influenced. So there's a lot of different risks from water. And so here's a cool infographic they have for Florida DEM on, just for Michael, what kind of funding was available. So this isn't just FEMA. I'm going to step back a little bit. I'll go back into FEMA and the BRIC, but just to show you, so there's disaster funding and there's non-disaster related funding. So just for Michael, there was $2 billion available. There was CDBG BRIC funding, there was FEMA funding, and it wasn't just available for the area in dark blue that you see here in the map in the top right. That was the area impacted, but when the disaster funding comes out, there's tiers. So you have tier 1, and those areas impacted can apply first, but then every county in Florida is available. It can submit applications, and there's so much money available, because what they do is they take 6% of the disaster declarations and they put that into pre-disaster funding. So I know jurisdictions all over Florida that were applying for Michael, and we helped a lot of them for Michael funding. So this is a cool graphic, but this is my craziest slide with a lot of text, so I'm sorry, but I'll send you guys this deck just so you can refer to it. I just want to point out, on the right, you can see disaster declaration versus not. What the various FEMA programs are. So from here on, I'm going to focus on number 1, the BRIC program, Building Resilient Infrastructure Communities. It's a brand new program. Previously, it was called the Pre-Disaster Mitigation Program, PDM. And a few years ago, the funding available from this program was 90 million, and then went up to 200 million. It was 230. And then this year it's 500 million. And that money, like I said, is 6% of the disaster declarations. So that's for this year. Well, guess what? Next year in 2021, they're going to set that amount, that pot of money available. It's going to be 6% of the disasters from 2020. That's going to include COVID. That's going to include all the fires out west, all of the hurricanes we've gotten and will get. So I'm not going to be surprised next year if there's $1 billion pot. This is a lot of money. And these applications are so crazy. You have to be an expert to put them together. I'm serious. And so I think that's why it's just it's really hard for local governments to just especially if you don't have, a grant writer expertise to put it all together. So we just, we can help with any part of it. And a lot of local governments that I'm friends with, I don't even, they ask me questions or tips, and I don't even, we don't have a contract. I just give them ideas or templates or, so there's a whole range of what we can help with. But this BRIC, I'm leading the development of 8 applications right now, and some of them are actually for $50 million because they also raised the cap. So where is it? Here. So if you see here, the $500 million, each project that you apply for, and so one city can apply for 5 projects. Each of those projects they will fund, like Kevin was saying, there's that 75-25 ratio. They'll fund 75% of the project up to $50 million. So for the first round of BRIC for this year, the applications are due to FEMA by January 29th of next year. But the state of Florida is going to want them earlier. They haven't really told us yet, but it's going to likely be November, December. And I skipped a slide here, just giving you an idea of both of these websites. At the bottom right, you can go there and you can actually look at every year what applications are awarded to Florida between the FMA, that's the one that Kevin was talking about, that's getting homes out of the floodplain, and then the PDM, which is now BRIC. But Florida just last year got over $5 million between the two of them. And if you look at who's been awarded this funding, you just see the same counties over and over again, or same areas, Pasco County, Volusia County. So there's just certain jurisdictions that are taking advantage of the funding and others that are not. So there's not that many awards, and a lot of them are just going to the same jurisdictions. Any questions so far about BRIC before I get more into, like, here you can see their strategic plan, guiding principles. You guys are following? Okay. Yeah, so they have this 5-year strategic plan, and it's really focusing now on this preventative, and that it's not just FEMA that should be coming in and helping, that there should be partnerships and capacity building. They want to focus on larger infrastructure projects that have a bigger impact across community lifelines. And so all of this language, we put these in the applications because we know that's what they like to hear. And it is very important, like what you guys were talking about earlier, making sure that things are holistic. You know, like as Paul mentioned, a lot of the projects I do that are not FEMA are related to health or equity or affordable housing. So that's really my passion, is the social justice and environmental justice part of what we're doing. And that's why I think funding is so important, because the first part of my career working in climate, it was all planning and making plans, and it was so frustrating for me to see there's so much planning and there's not enough action, and you just see all these plans and what happens to them. They're not, and I've been working, Paul told me about your action plan, and we've been talking about it, and I've been giving him tips like how to make it actionable and make sure that it's actually implemented with having specific measurable results. But the thing is, like, what is the barrier to implementation in most cases is the funding. So being able to say, like, $55 million going towards infrastructure resilience, I can be really proud of that actually, like, there's shovels in the ground and there are things happening rather than a plan. Plans are really important, of course, obviously, but one of the reasons I love this so much is that it's actually, you can see people and infrastructure and communities being protected. So to be eligible for this BRIC funding, it has to be cost effective. So the most work by far in a FEMA application is the benefit cost analysis. They have a tool, and you have to use a lot of GIS and modeling. But as long as you can show that the benefits outweigh the cost by a ratio over 1, even by 1 penny, it's already checks that box, right? So for Whitcomb Bayou, it's really the losses avoided that would be the benefits, and those would be the avoided damages to the buildings, those homes along the road and their contents, and also, of course, the use of the road when it's inundated. So reducing the damages of any type of hazard, meeting the different building codes. Kevin touched on that. There's also some other requirements, like, just things you have to document if it's a historic home or archaeologic issues. It's not a deal breaker. You just have to document everything. And then Kevin mentioned your hazard mitigation plan with Pinellas County. So you check that box too. So you guys have definitely been pre-screened as eligible for the Whitcomb Bayou. I give you my check. And just, this is a cool infographic on the Arcadis approach to benefit cost analysis. We don't just do FEMA grants. Actually, when Paul was showing those pictures of the living shoreline, it reminded me of this $60 million project that we're doing in the city of Norfolk, Virginia, which is a lot of amazing living shorelines. Like, that was a HUD project. So whether it's Army Corps, HUD, FEMA, they have specific methodologies and specific standards, and we know them all by the book. We know all the different ways you can mix and match them so that you get the best benefit cost ratio and the most compelling business case for your grant application, not just for saving money, but also you can see on this infographic on the right, some of the projects we've done have to do with water quality and reducing stormwater runoff, or healthcare costs, or affordable housing. So there's some really cool ways that you can quantify the benefits. Okay, so yes.
I'm sorry, we are going way over.
Oh, I'm done. This was my last slide.
Okay, but we need to have a motion though to extend the meeting beyond 8 p.m. Because there's no way we're going to get through all the rest of it in 10 minutes. So can I please get a motion to extend the meeting past 8 p.m.?
I move that we extend the meeting past 8 p.m.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, thank you.
Okay. Yeah, so we can we can open it up to discussion. I really just wanted to share with you about the grants and all of our exciting things that we've done. I put together this elevation map just showing how low everything is around Whitcomb Bayou. I mean, this orange is 1 to 2 feet above NAV D88, which is basically mean sea level. And your nearest tide gauge that the NOAA models for on the sea level rise viewer is Clearwater, and you can see that the flood days per year of above where water exceeds that 1.74, which is a threshold set by the National Weather Service. So you already are getting 5 days per year where the water just naturally, because of king tides and things like that, is higher than that 1.74. So you're already getting, that explains, the pictures that Paul was showing. So, I do have one more. So this is the, I have other slides about the scoring criteria. Those are reference if you want to look at those later, and just other projects I've done that are similar. I had some case studies, but I can stop here and open it up for questions and discussions. I just wanted to show that I did look at the flood insurance rate maps to see that if the base flood elevation around Whitcomb Bayou is 11 feet, that living shoreline or whatever coastal protection you would want, at minimum for these FEMA grants, they have to at least protect to the base flood elevation. So it is going to be an issue, visibility. I mean, it's something to think about, that natural shorelines sometimes people end up going with hardening. It's unfortunate, and there's ways around it. I mean, in Norfolk, we got that high, and it was a berm that we vegetated. So there are ways for natural shoreline protection to get this high. But if you look at that 10 to 11 feet, I mean, everything here that I colored is below 10 feet. So all of these areas, if we were to protect the coastline here up to 10 feet, all these areas would be protected. So I'll stop there and gather your thoughts or answer questions.
Karen, that was excellent. Thank you so much. It's obvious that there's a lot more information that you have to share, but what does the 25% matching entail? What forms of matching can there be? Is it strictly cash, or can certain expert offerings of whatever, or hard labor contribute to part of that copay?
Yeah, it's very flexible with the match. And even if you find, like, if you apply for a DEP grant, that counts towards match. Any other type of funding, they want you to have partnerships and have funding. So whether you can split it up, it could be city funds, it could definitely be your efforts, your time. So you just keep track of the time of the city staff or experts or anything that you can just show documentation of match will work. Even so, like I said, whatever is paid, if we have some kind of task order to help you with the application, that goes towards a match, or as soon as the grant gets awarded, you can get reimbursed 75% of that. So, and then also it's called pre-award costs. So if you spend money like that study you said for $64,000, that could go towards the match too. So anything that you're spending to try and understand design or survey or engineering as you develop the application. And a lot of cities that we work with, they're planning to do this project anyway. Like most of them, we look in their CIP, we look at all their projects that we help them prioritize. I have slides for that later on, like, what are the best ways to prioritize, but a lot of the times they know exactly what they want to do and they have the money to pay for it, but why not use that money for something else? This is perfect for a FEMA grant, so we go for it. So even if you're, a lot of them, they've already done all these studies because they're planning to do it anyways, but save that money for something else.
That's nice. The flexibility, that really makes it a win-win. Thank you.
Another cool thing with the flexibility is that, they call them shell applications. Like sometimes with the disaster funding, especially, like you have, if your project is on, I don't know if you guys work with the local mitigation strategy, but if the project is on there and it's highly ranked, then the jurisdiction, they call it a shell application because they literally write their name and they sign it and they submit it. And guess what? FEMA will award it, but they'll be like, yeah, just fill out the rest of the application and the money's yours because it's highly ranked. So that's another good thing, because if part of the application is not complete or we're not sure, it doesn't matter. We just do as the best we can to estimate the scope of work, what the budget is, and what the schedule is. It has to be less than 3 years on the schedule, but then you can get 2 years of extension. So you have 5 years really to do the project. And it's so flexible that anything that you want to change, even after the project is awarded, we're like, oh, we want to change the scope. I have a flood wall that we're doing for a water treatment plant, and they just had flooding in August that was higher than the 500-year flood. So you see pictures of the water marks, and they're above the door of the building. So we changed the design and we're making it higher, and they're not going to pay the extra money, but they're like, yeah, of course, change it. So it is flexible.
I'm wondering what action is being asked of this committee this evening with this presentation. It's very technical, so I would certainly need to personally go through a lot of this on my own to understand it more. But what is it that you're like, it was put on the agenda as this grant proposal. Help me connect the dots of what is being asked of us.
Dory, I think that Paul Smith could probably answer that better than anybody. Perhaps City Manager Mark Licouris, who asked that it be placed on the agenda, could answer that. But I think that, I suspect, I don't know, but I suspect that the city manager is interested in what the Sustainability Committee thinks about the feasibility of this proposal.
Yes, I think the specific question, Paul, that was in your email to the mayor was, would you support us going for a grant for this particular Whitcomb Bayou project? Am I correct?
And let me clarify, Tide is a nonprofit corporation, it's a 501c3. We can apply for a BRIC grant as partners of a municipality. So we are proposing a partnership to do exactly that. So a grant proposal would be written presumably by Karen, by the city staff, and by our grant writing subcommittee.
Excuse me, I'm kind of with Dory on this. I'm getting a piece of the information. This is new material, and it's pretty in-depth material. I think that the committee as a group, this is something that we're interested in learning more about, or we might be open to, or whatever. But what I think would be helpful is to have an overview of how all these pieces fit together. So Paul Smith, the city manager, or who's proposing this? How would this committee interface with that? What is being asked of, as Dory asked, what is being asked of us? But if there could be a broader overview so that we can get just like the picture of what the story is that is trying to be told here. Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense to me. A lot has been thrown at you, and we were added to the agenda only a couple of weeks ago. So yeah, we can put together a pretty good outline of what we are proposing and how the Sustainability Committee and the opinions of the members of this committee are important. Paul, what do you think?
Yeah, if I may add, thank you very much. I learned a lot just watching this presentation, Karen. Thank you. I developed some questions in my mind before and during this. And one of the things I say is we've got 46 miles of shoreline in the city. And I saw one of the figures that Karen showed actually looked like, is it Kramer Bayou? The one with Riverside Drive on it actually showed to be even lower. In that one particular chart. And I would just say, I'm not so sure this Whitcomb project is indeed, the city's highest priority. And we'd want to be comfortable with that before committing resources. I've always heard that the easiest part is getting the grant. Then you've actually got to put the resources on doing the work. And that would be, no matter what kind of grant funding you get, you got to manage that project. You've got to have the community acceptance. I think we're talking about, sounds like adding about 8 feet of elevation. You might not even be able to see the water from some of those homes if I'm understanding the concept right. So we had a major just feedback from the community on putting a sidewalk in. So you could imagine a project of this scale is going to take a real amount of effort to get it done. I'm not saying it can't be done, but I think there's a lot of questions to be answered before, the city could say, let's jump on board with this now.
One of the reasons Turn the Tide proposed this was because of the focus that the city has shown, the Board of Commissioners has shown recently regarding South Spring Boulevard, which is, of course, the eastern shore of Whitcomb Bayou. We have talked about, or they have talked about, the creation of a mini roundabout at the junction of Pineapple, Martin Luther King, and South Spring. And that is still on the books. And Paul, you probably know more about that than I do, but they have also talked about a walkway, a pedestrian walkway, or a pedestrian and bicycle walkway from Craig Park along South Spring. The shores of Whitcomb Bayou are in, as I tried to demonstrate, pretty rough shape. The flooding that occurs is already damaging the Athena apartments there at the corner and multiple other residences and apartments along that stretch. The erosion there is worse than any place on Kramer. And the city, I believe, owns a park along the south shore of Whitcomb, which is basically being washed away. Add to that the unanimous recent vote to do 2 surveys, et cetera, along Whitcomb Bayou, along South Spring. And there's a lot of interest focused on Whitcomb. Also, the shores of Whitcomb Bayou are not built on. the shores that are eroding don't have structures, don't have houses on them as they do on Kramer. So there are a lot of reasons why we focused on Whitcomb. But again, we look at Whitcomb, we look at this project as a model which can be applied to the other bayous, the other waterways in our city.
Talking with my microphone muted. I guess in terms of next steps or where we go from here, looking for action that I don't think that there's any action we take tonight on this item. I think that we need to get some clarity from city staff and from the commission too. I mean, I would think to see if there is interest. I don't know that like we would be the ones that would authorize any kind of partnership or anything like that. So I'm just not sure, because we haven't had, we're learning as we go. We haven't had an issue brought before us like this. So I'm kind of at a loss of like what even to do right now in terms of action, other than recommend that if you don't mind, I know that it's an inconvenience for you, it's your time, Karen, and I appreciate it. But continuing to dialogue with city staff and with the commission and see how we might, what our role might be in this.
Yeah, I think that's great. I mean, I wasn't expecting you guys to be like, okay, write the grant for us. This is the type of thing that it's a long process. I mean, I wouldn't think that we would want to get something in for this year. I think that it's something to start talking about and find a project to work on for next year. The plan that you guys are doing is amazing. And I think the process of like planning and then action, we just don't have time, right? Like, especially what Kevin was saying, that these grants take so long, that let's get the ball rolling. Let's get some money in your pot to support the city. I mean, a $50 million project, that could make a huge difference. Where could the city get the money for that? So I think that it just talking about it and shooting around ideas, maybe reaching out to the local mitigation committee. I know Kathy Perkins, do you guys know her? Because for Miami-Dade County, she was our local mitigation strategy coordinator forever, and then she moved to Pinellas County. So I don't know if that's still what she does, but you have a local mitigation strategy and there's projects on there, and you want to get a lot of projects on there because that's how Florida is going to rank them. So it's just things like I'm giving you ideas and tips to start thinking about it. And I've gotten into like a friendly relationship with Paul. Like, we met for lunch when I was over there vacation because we connected on health. Like, I'm working on the project that I'm working on through him is a CDC project. So I'm not doing this. I'm not your normal consultant. I'm doing this. I'm in consulting because I know it's a way that I can make a difference. I love teaching. I wish I could just be a professor and make half the salary. I don't wish that. But like this is shovels in the ground. Like it feels for me like this is what I care about and I want to make a difference. And so especially the projects we do with water, wastewater infrastructure, like some of this decaying pump stations that Miami project that we did. I mean, I think about all those people that are not going to have sewage backups because of the project that's going forward right now. And so this is why I do it. I think so. I'll send you this deck and you can look at it and talk about it, and just, very informally just ask questions, or if you think about things, or if you want me to talk to somebody else, I'm happy to do it because I want to help.
Thank you so much. I feel your passion and I very much appreciate you, because I feel bad though that like I know that you're a consultant and this is taking time from your day to be with us and to help educate us, because there's so much here to learn. And I think that our City Commission would benefit from understanding this as well, that this process and how lengthy it is, but how much money there is at the end of the process if we can do it correctly. And if as a community we can coalesce around an idea that people can be happy with, because I mean, I know, we all know that riprap project on the southern shore of South Spring is like very contentious. And I certainly would not want us getting, you know, into something like that. But I think that there's definitely projects that the community could rally around and could really help us be more resilient and address our flooding issues. So I guess we'll just leave it at that then we'll continue the conversation. And thank you very much for your time, and really appreciate you giving us all of this. And I would love to see the deck with, you know, so that I can kind of go down rabbit holes and learn more on my own.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen.
Okay, are there any other comments or questions before we move on to the next item from the committee?
I'm going to sign off. Bye, guys. It was nice to meet you all.
Bye, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, hearing no other thoughts on that, then let's move along to item number 5, which is future presenters. There was a backup or a document in the backup that is the org chart for the city. And I'm not going to try to screen share. I'm just going to hold up what I've done. So I kind of like taped it together.
Hey, Dory, I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt.
Yeah.
There was a public comment that was emailed that Paul actually has to read regarding the Whitcomb Bayou.
Thank you. I'm so sorry, Ashley. Thank you.
Thank you
So
very
we're
much.
going back to item number 4.
Okay. Hold just a second and I'll find it. So this is an email that came in today. Everybody still hear me okay?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this came from Laura Salisbury, emailed to the sustainability website, and the subject is agenda item 4, Whitcomb Bayou project. Greetings, I will not be available to make comment at this evening's virtual meeting, but I would like to express as a longtime Tarpon Springs resident living near the bayou how pleased I am the Sustainability Committee is presenting this concept. Its goals are critical for Tarpon Springs protection and restoration of our valuable natural resources and maintaining property values and a way of life that nurtures and sustains our town. I'm thrilled to see the kind of state-of-the-art problem solving and collaboration that this proposal represents. I believe this is crucial for our mature and healthy growth as a gem-like waterfront city. It may not be a simple solution and may require stretching and reaching, investing assets in an effort in a new way. I find this refreshing and hopeful and appreciate what the Sustainability Committee is bringing to the table in Tarpon Springs. And that's Laura Salisbury, 800 Chesapeake Drive, 61.
Thank you, Paul. And I apologize that I didn't get that in the right order there. Okay, so now we're moving on to future presenters. And like I was mentioning, the org chart, what I did was I just printed it and then I added the name and the date of city staff when we heard from the different departments. And the idea that I was trying to do is kind of holistically look at all of the different departments within the city to see where we still might want to hear presentations that would help guide the action plan. So it looks to me that we've heard from almost everyone on the chart, I think, that would feed into, except perhaps maybe economic development and cultural services. And if we drill down into public works more on maybe the fleet, maybe stormwater. I would like to get some feedback from the group about that. I just thought that it might help us all to kind of visualize where in the process we are. So I'll pause there and leave it open for conversation. has everybody had a chance to look at it before the meeting? And is there any other recommendations for future presentations that anyone else has besides the 3 that I just offered up?
It's definitely helpful to have just this map of the city, basically. So yeah, I think stormwater would be a good one to hear from. I think Paul might have already mentioned a little bit about it in some presentations, but knowing more about it would be good. I guess I can take another look at it later and just kind of get a feel for everything.
So are we, for our next agenda, is anybody opposed to any of those departments, or does anyone have a particular order that they would like Paul to try to get?
I would like to hear from the economic development coordinator, as well as do we have I don't know, I'm just kind of throwing out there emergency responses, whether it's the police department or fire department. I mean, there are some issues from them where there was talk a while ago about Beckett Bridge being closed, and how does emergency personnel then function as far as getting to that area over there, and Beckett Bridge being a completely different disaster, right? Right, that was happening at the time, as opposed to like the sustainability, but just fire and rescue and police and what their concerns are as far as streets flooding and things like that.
Thank you, Karen. Okay, any other conversation about future presenters, or do we think we have a little bit of direction, and we can also follow up in future meetings if the chart was inspirational to any of us looking at it going forward? Okay, then let's move on to items for the next agenda. Paul Smith, do you think that we can have another presentation? And then we also need to go back and add the things that we missed tonight. So I think discussion for the community engagement. So we didn't really discuss in any detail because we moved it forward, the special events and then paths moving forward for community engagement. And then a presentation from perhaps economic development. And then I would like to have us all kind of take a look at the star rating system again, individually. I'm going to share my screen. Share. Okay. Just as a task maybe that we can work on, and then come back and have a conversation about, and recognizing that STAR Communities is just one framework. So perhaps looking at the STAR Communities framework, and then if anyone else has any other frameworks that they would like for us to consider using so that we can start honing in on what the focus areas would be. I think that it's time to start having that conversation. If you look at the STAR Communities website, to me, what was useful is, like, if you click on the education tab here, it brings you to all of the different components. So if you click on one of the topic areas like climate and energy, it gives the title and then the purpose for each of the objectives. So like climate and energy has 7 that are identified. And I think it would be helpful for us if we just take a look at the chart. Oops, come on. At the chart and see, because we had talked before about doing this and we didn't really, but prioritizing what our interests are And I think that that'll help us to kind of navigate through maybe doing some, instead of whole group thinking, like individual thinking about some of these. And we may want to do individual work on particular areas of our interest. So just looking through each of these areas and kind of thinking like ambient noise and light, for example, is that something that we would want to, do we think that would be of useful or necessary for the city of Tarpon Springs, or not? And just kind of going through that. And what helped me was when you scroll down underneath the subjects here, and then you click on like climate and energy, it's more descriptive. And it helps me to see like what are the actual actions that the city might take. So for example, one of them is to conduct a local climate risk and vulnerability assessment. That I think is something, me personally, that I think that we would want to include in our sustainability action plan. So I would just encourage us all in the next month to take a look at the chart, and then to take a look at the website and look through what all of these mean, what they have kind of framed, and then also maybe see what there isn't that we might want to really focus on. So for example, there isn't a category specifically on flooding. And maybe we think that that's an area that is of high enough need that we would want to add to our framework and really make that one of the focus areas. So I guess kind of three things, looking at different frameworks. So in addition to the STAR framework, if there's another one that you would like to share with the group. So for example, this is the United Nations framework for sustainable goals. And the city of Orlando uses those for their framework. But like I said, the city of St. Pete uses the STAR framework. I know Ramona mentioned two others that I'm not even familiar with. So there's definitely many different ways to look at this. But if we could first start looking at different frameworks, and then second to start to think about what the components would be under each of them. And then to maybe take a look at doing an inventory of what you personally are feeling is your passion for. So maybe it's the economy and jobs, and health and safety, or where you think you might want to plug in. And the reason I'm mentioning that is because just want to remind us of the conversation that Commissioner Donovan brought to us several months ago, where he was wanting to do community cleanups and also to do a green business award. So maybe that's something that one of us says, I really want to start working on this. I don't want to wait until it's in the action plan. I want to work with Commissioner Donovan and maybe the Chamber of Commerce or business, the Merchants Association, to work out what rubric for giving an award would look like. And then I think that we can start moving forward with individual actions that we could loop into the action plan. So instead of waiting until we have a plan, I think that we can start individually looking at, like, I really want to start working on this. And then thinking about, is there a commissioner? Is there a nonprofit? Kind of like what Paul did, Paul Robinson. This is what, we need to take some action now. And then I think we can maybe fold that into the sustainability action plan. So instead of just waiting till the end. So those are my thoughts for the next meeting, is having a conversation about that, like looking at the focus areas and then starting to look at what we are interested in and seeing what we can start taking some actions on while we're working on the plan. And I will stop talking.
I don't know whether this could be an agenda item, but tonight gave a lot of food for thought. The Whitcomb Bayou project and grant proposal brings up, and it was presented to us via Turn the Tide for Tarpon. But it brings up a lot of questions to my mind as to interface that we have with other advisory boards and with the city itself. And I guess I want to have more understanding. I mean, I felt like, oh, what Karen was talking to us about is obvious need. And, you want to say, oh yeah, go for it, go for it and start getting the grant rolling, and yet at the same time, there's a lot of delicacy and diplomacy when it comes to interfacing with other players. And I guess I don't quite understand how the sustainability committee at this point, we're just in our infancy to some degree. I mean, we've been working for a year, but we're still the new advisory board. I just feel like I want to have some more understanding of how we do this without stepping on anybody else's toes, without overreaching. What are the processes? Because I mean, yes, I would love to have said, yes, let's go, let's move ahead to some, on looking at grants, but what are the considerations? It was obviously somewhat of a sale pitch for what Karen is doing and how she is proposing these grants where funding is available. Anyway, from my perspective, I'd just like to understand that a little bit better. It feels like we're kind of putting the cart ahead of the horse sometimes when we might be doing work that we'll have to step back and find out, well, what were actually the more official proper channels to go through. I would like to have more understanding of that. I don't know who could address it or who understands the players and how we interface with them. But that's something that I feel like is necessary, at least for me. I don't know whether it's necessary for anybody else, but I sure would like to have a greater understanding of how we're working with the other stakeholders here, including the community. I mean, we could say, oh, this is a wonderful project, but how does this affect people that live right there at Whitcomb Bayou if they're going to lose their view? So those are things that we have to think about.
I agree, Denise, and I don't know that there's any sort of like great magic wand solution for this right now, as we're kind of like feeling our way through it.
Yes.
I think that probably what we would need, I mean, certainly what we would need to do is, I think that it would be okay and appropriate for us to be having these different ideas and conversations with other community members, and then just bring it back as an item for a discussion. But I also think that we need a little bit stronger parameters when something's put on the agenda, like, trying to keep time limit of maybe 20 minutes for an agenda so that we all understand. And then also maybe having a real clear ask at the end so that we all understand what it is that the committee is being, I mean, is this informational? Is this pretty much, I have an idea that's pretty tight, and I don't, I don't think it's going to cost the city too much money. I don't think it's going to put out too many resources. This is my proposal kind of thing. I don't, like, for example, doing a community cleanup. I don't think that we need to have like a 20-minute conversation about doing that. I think if one of us wants to work with a nonprofit or a commissioner like Commissioner Donovan and say, we would like to do this. And we would like it to be, the ask would be that the sustainability committee is promoting it and perhaps like putting it out on our channels, or we would like the commission to put it out on their channels, something like that. You know, I think that that would just be a lot easier for us to digest if we have some limits on the resources of everyone in terms of time, and then also real specific ask. Is that helpful? Is anyone else agreeing with that or thinking that that's reasonable?
I agree with you, Dory.
I do as well.
Excellent. So we've got, okay, so let's continue on then putting together the agenda for next month. So we've got the continued conversation with community engagement. We need to have a follow-up conversation. If there's any questions that we have of Kevin Powell, or if there were any for the arborist or any comments that we'd like to make, roll that into a follow-up conversation. Having a presentation from some department within the city, and then a conversation about, well, I guess that moving forward, that could be part of the moving forward conversation is the, what I had just discussed about taking a look at the different frameworks. And I think that that's a pretty full agenda. But if there's anything else that you guys think we need to add. Okay, then hearing none, I say we go with that. And then let's move along to the next item on our agenda, which is public comments. I do believe we received an email. Paul Smith, do you have that pulled up, or is that something that was addressed to no, am I incorrect?
Oh, I know what you mean. Yeah, we just received our first email on our flyer. And I have to say it was very direct about feedback. That's why we get feedback, because sometimes we might miss something. It was definitely, I think, a blind spot, but it was sort of a criticism that we did it on non-recycled paper. And this person, basically their point of view was that I already do these things and you all need to do a better job at your thing. So, you know, that's what we want is feedback. We got some. It may not be what we expected, but that's sometimes the best feedback. So certainly Ashley and I took that one to heart, and we will keep that in mind on any future things with sending anything out on paper.
The old saying about no good deed going unpunished.
Yes.
Oh, we had that conversation. We had that conversation in my house, and my daughter looked and said, "This isn't recyclable paper." And my husband looked and said, "It's not." So we had some education in our home as well. So I was pleased the information got out. Maybe it was just the vehicle.
This group had some great discussion on this over, I think, 3 different meetings, and that I don't think ever came up. So it just goes to show that many times the public knows better than we do.
Lesson learned. We're learning, constantly learning. Are there any other members of the public that would like to make a comment now?
If anyone in the public would like to make a comment, you can raise your hand and we'll allow you in to talk. And we do not have any raised hands at this time.
Thank you. All right, then moving on to staff comments. Is there anything, Paul or Ashley, that you would like to discuss?
Sorry, Paul, did you want to go before me?
No, you first.
Okay, so I did want to follow up with you guys on 2 items from the last meeting. One of them was on recycling and wondering if businesses need to recycle. I did follow up with Tom Function on that. He's the Public Works Director who has spoken here before. And he let me know that commercial entities are not required to recycle, but they are encouraged. And he said, should they recycle, they're not bound by city sanitation contract to use our vendor. So that is the update for recycling. And then also I reached out to Karen Lemons again about that monthly newsletter. And she did let me know as far as what material can be shared on there is things like events. So for example, if we were to do the event with Commissioner Donovan, with the community cleanup, that would be something we could post on there. She said advertising for feedback on larger issues, feedback surveys, things with like city impact. And then also for the 900 subscribers that she had let me know she has, she said those include residents and business owners. So that was a follow-up on the 900 subscribers as well. But that is all I have. So if you guys have any questions.
Thank you, Ashley. That's helpful.
I'll be brief. You all have hung in there very well tonight, and sorry for my part of making this a long agenda. I just wanted to tell you all that I did apply last week by the deadline for the state Florida Resilient Coastlines Program Resilient Planning Grant. It's a $75,000 grant. And what it is all about planning our vulnerability assessment. And I feel really good about our application. We worked with our stormwater consultant to put it together, but also showing a lot of good regional collaboration in our application. What this will do for us if we're successful is it would give us more horsepower to finish up our SAP by showing that vulnerability. If you recall, the city of Sarasota's vulnerability plan we liked a lot because it actually showed, infrastructure and prioritizations of capital and all that sort of thing. So I think it'll be a great tool that we can blend right in to our sustainability action plan and our comprehensive plan. But that's all I have for tonight.
Thank you, Paul. Any questions about that grant? I think that that's a fantastic opportunity for, if hopefully we can get that money, we can be able to demonstrate where our, what we need to be, where we can be more resilient for the city. And I think that that'll fold in nicely with what we're trying to do. So, all right. Any committee comments? Open it up.
I did have one short one. I don't know if we already did this, but it might be a good idea to send the results of the listening sessions to like the Board of Commissioners or any other departments that may be directly involved in the things they were talking about. Because I understand what Paul was saying, that like, we don't directly do those things or have like jurisdiction over them, but we can have a hand in like what they're pertaining to. And I think that feedback might be good for other departments and stuff to hear.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a great idea.
I'll follow up. Thank you.
Any other committee comments? Well, I will just say that I would like to respond to the email that we received. So I will take that as a personal to-do, and hopefully that resident will want to get involved with us and help us to have those creative brainstorms before we put out a non-recycled paper. All right. Any other, let me pause for another second and see if there's any other comments that anybody would like to make among the committee. Okay, well then, thank you guys very much for this longer meeting than usual. I think it was super helpful and informative. There was a lot of information exchanged. So I will wrap up the things that I asked more clearly and send them over to Paul so that we have a little bit like a real clear direction of what for our next meeting for that conversation, so that it can be as productive as possible. And with that, I would like to entertain a motion to adjourn, please.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 All right, then we are adjourned at 8:40. Thank you all so much. Have a great month.
Good night, everybody.